So you got your first bait caster and now you're not sure what to do with it. In this video, I'm going to break down everything you need to know about getting your first bait caster, from how to set it up to how to adjust it to make sure you have the easiest experience possible when trying to use a bait caster for the first time. Alright, so you got your first bait caster, right? Freshly in the box. This is an Arc Gravity G5, and if you'll notice on the box, what it says is, it says the hand. So this is a right-handed. I'm left-handed, but I have some right-handed ones that are brand new in the box, so we're going to use that. It'll tell you the line capacity, so it says 12-pound line. You can put 100 yards on here. Max drag pounds, 14 pounds. That's stuff you don't really need to know. It's not really of your concern, especially if you guys are just starting out. But one thing you want to know is this IPT. This IPT is inches per turn, and for a 6:4-to-1 gear ratio reel, you get 25.3 inches per turn. That's one full revolution of the handle, and that is fairly slow for a gear ratio reel. But let's open it up. That'll come into play when you get better at understanding these things. So we open it up, right? I already took it out of the bag, so don't be too upset. Right off the bat, here's your reel, and you'll notice, as most reels do, most bait casters, there's two adjustments. You have an adjustment knob here, and you have an adjustment knob here. Now, for people who are just starting out, you'll see there's a minus and a plus. That's less torque that it's going to have on there, or like less hold back power versus more hold back power. So for those of you guys just starting out, you're going to want to crank this up more toward the plus, because that's going to control that line as it comes off that spool a lot more. Same with this. This is something you're going to want to tighten down, but this knob right here is more adjusted to the weight of your lure. You know, this is going to be something that you adjust. The heavier your lure you have on here, you're going to want to tighten it down a little bit more. The lighter lure you have on here, you're going to want to loosen it a little bit more. But that's kind of the two basic adjustment knobs that you have here. And what a bait caster does is, as you turn this reel, you'll see this line runs across this track right here. So that's something to keep important, because this is something you're always going to want to keep greased, is this track right in the back here. If you ever find that this isn't turning across here, or it's getting stuck coming across here as you're turning it, you need to grease that track. All right, so you have one more adjustment, and this is your drag. Your drag is right here. And so right off the box, or right out of the box, they come fairly loose. And so what you want to do is tighten it down pretty tight, because with bait casters, a lot of times you keep that drag fairly tight and you use your thumb to adjust this, or let line out. And so now you know how to adjust it. Let's talk about how to cast it. So we put it on a rod. Now you'll notice, to cast it, you have a button right here. This is what's going to let that line come off of that spool. And so where people get confused, and where people really struggle with a bait caster right out of the box, is if you don't have these adjusted right, as soon as you let this go, that's going to free spool. There's nothing holding that back. If you have these two loose, that'll just go. So that's what you have to pay attention to. But that is how you cast it. That is what lets that pressure go. So you can see you turn the handle like that. Drags tightened down, adjusted these. Let's talk about how to put line on a bait caster. If you're going to put fluorocarbon on there, you can tie it right here. You can see this bait caster has a little track right in the middle here your line will cinch down into. If you're going to put braid on here, which a lot of reels you do, you need to put tape on that braid, because you can't tie a knot with braid because it doesn't actually cinch on. What'll happen is it'll slip the whole way around. And so if you're going to put braid, what you do is you literally just you would run it down through your little track right here. You have to put it through this track, and then you would just tape this line to that spool. You just put a piece of tape over it and then do a couple loose reels on it, and then that would cinch it right down. So if you only have one or two bait casters, you're going to want to put some kind of line on there that kind of does it all, right? And so for me, usually like 14 to 16 pound fluorocarbon is going to be my go-to. That's a really, really, really good starting point. That's going to be something that you can fish jigs with, you can fish swim baits with, you can fish top waters with. You can kind of get away with everything. Now, most reels have a deeper spool than arc reels. Arc reels actually come with a bit shallower spool, and so If you have pretty much any other reel other than an arc reel, you're going to want to put some kind of backing on it first. And whether that's braided line, whether that's cheap monofilament, you want to put something on there that's relatively non-expensive. You know, braid is good because it never goes bad, but you can also just go buy the cheapest 12 or like 15 pound line you can find and put that on there, because you really only use the top third of your spool. You're never going to cast it and cast the entire spool. Arcs you can, the rest of the reels you can't. And so fill up half of your spool with the cheapest line you can physically find, around 15 pound, and then tie a knot, usually like a blood knot or something, onto the line that you really want to use, which is a little bit higher grade fluorocarbon. You know, your P lines, your FC Snipers, your Cortland, all your higher grade lines in that 14 to 16 pound, and then that'll be like your using line, the line that you're actually going to use. Alright, so I'm going to show you guys how to attach my fluorocarbon to my reel, so that way you guys can understand how that works. When you're first spooling it up, you can either thread it all the way through all the guides, or you can just thread it through one of the guides. But it's important to put it at least through one of the guides. And so for this purpose, I'm going to put it just through one of the guides. And then I'm going to run it down. And it's important to go through this little track runner right here, because that's what's going to make sure your line goes evenly across your spool. That is an important step. So run that down. So then this is kind of the tricky part, is you have to take your line and thread it through the back of the reel. You can see it comes out right there. Because then what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to thread it back through to get it to come back out on underneath the spool, because you basically just have to get it around the spool. And there's a few different ways you can do this. You could honestly just put a piece of tape on there and run it around, but you just want to get it around the spool. You know, that's all you're trying to do right there, is just get it around the spool. So then I have it around the spool, and all I'm going to do is take my line, hook it around that line, the same line. So I went around the spool. Now I'm going to come around that piece of line, and all I'm going to do is tie a clinch knot. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm not tying a super strong knot. I'm just tying just a clinch knot. But I'm tying it onto the line itself, so that when I pull it, as you pull it, it tightens right down onto the spool. And fluorocarbon, you don't have to tape it or anything, because it stretches and it compacts. As you reel it, that line will just go back and forth. Now it's important when you're spooling up a reel that you don't just leave it lay there like that, because as you see, it'll start to twist your line, and that's not what you want it to do. And so what I do is I typically hold it like this. This is going to be how I hold this, because if I hold it like this, now what I'm going to have is that line is going to come off of the spool the way it came on. And so what I mean by that is, if you have it where it's coming over the top, where it's laying flat like this, it's going to come off the top and twist. But this is how they put the line on the spool, and so if I take it off the same way it came on, there won't be there won't be twist in it. And so you'll see it just goes back and forth like this, and that's the most effective way that I've found to do that, because now I can get all that line on there super easy and super simple, just like that. So the key to adjusting it after you've got your line onto your spool, normally you'd fill it all the way up, but for this video purpose I only filled it a little bit up. And so I filled it up, I have my lure tied on, I have a jerkbait tied on there. And what you want to do is, you can see if I let go of this with that jerkbait tied on there, it free spools all the way down, right? And for me, that's fine, because I understand how that works. But for you guys that are new and aren't sure how to cast these yet, what you're going to want to do is tighten this knob down until it stops free spooling that bait. So you can see it still free spools, but it's a little slower. So I'll tighten it a little bit more. And right there, you can see if I move it, it goes a little bit, but it really doesn't fall. You see it's barely moving, and that's going to be ideal, because that's what's going to cause you to not get backlashes. What's going to cause that reel to slow down. It's putting the brakes on it faster and faster for you. Now your casting distance isn't going to be as far, But what it's going to do is it's going to allow you to get the motions of the cast down, and it's going to allow you to get more comfortable with this reel without getting as frustrated, without having to pick out backlashes. So now that you know how to set up your bait caster, you can go out there and have a better time on the water and not get as frustrated with it. Don't get me wrong, everybody that uses a bait caster is going to backlash a reel at some point in time, but that's just part of the game. Hopefully these tips will help you to not have as many backlashes right off the get-go and keep you going, because bait casters are a great tool in a fisherman's arsenal. So thank you guys so much for watching. God bless, and don't be afraid to hit that subscribe button to follow along with the regular content, but I'll see you guys in the next video.